first time I saw these slides was about a day and a half ago. These are not my slides, these are push-to slides. I can, obviously I know requirements analysis. Most of you know requirements analysis. So I can certainly talk to you about defining requirements. I will use, I do say, buyer beware. I reserve the right to go, what? Huh? Nah. And say what I think. But hopefully you'll get something useful out of this today. Most of you know me. Most everyone knows me. I'm Paul Neve. You probably and as I said, these are not my slides, these are push-to slides. Most of you who have me way back when on Programming 1 know there is a rule in Paul Lectures, which is anyone who comes in late gets booed, right? So, just like old times, okay? Make sure anyone who comes in late gets a nice booing, all right? Okay. You're all writing proposals at the moment, okay? And, I imagine your supervisors have told you different things about what's required on that and what they're expecting to see and giving you some advice. But one of the first things you're going to do, give him 10 minutes. Stop! It's a Paul Neve lecture. You know what happens to the late comers. Boo! 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 Yeah. So, requirements analysis. One of the first things early on that you're going to do in your project is define your requirements. And you may not even realise you're doing it. I've read so many final year projects over the years that basically consist of someone plucking their requirements out of their backside. Okay? And this does not tend to accrue many marks. Because, and I don't know if your supervisors have told you this, but it's worth pointing out, your project is not about the actual final bit of software or whatever it is you're creating. That is the end of the journey. But your project is about the journey and your ability to articulate that journey, to produce a report that articulates that journey. The vast majority of your marks come from the final report. Bits and pieces picked up around proposals and progress and the viva and so on. But by and large, the vast majority of your marks you get in your project will be for that final report, your account of the journey. Okay? And so many people forget that. I see so many people turn up at the end of their project and they've got this cursory document and they've essentially written Windows 11. So they've got this stonking piece of software they've written, technically amazing, and they get a mediocre mark for their project. Because the project isn't about the artifact. The artifact is a part of the project, but it's about the journey. Okay? And one of the key parts, kind of key aspects of that journey from nowhere to stonkingly good piece of software, or whatever it is you're doing, is actually analysing your problem and defining the requirements. Engaging in requirements analysis. Okay? Now there's this funny cartoon that does the rounds in the IT industry, right? Okay? That goes something like this. The customer says they want a swing. The project leader thinks, well, I want a fairly, they're asking for something fairly simple. The software analyst designs that. That's what the coder came up with. That's what they gave the beta tester. That's how the marketing people described it. That's documentation. That's what they actually got installed at the end of the project. And that's what they were billed for. Okay? And a million years ago, I was an IT manager. I was involved in software development projects. And the money we spent on, bespoke software, and the time and the effort, and at the end of it all, after all that time and all that effort, what we got wasn't remotely what we needed or what we wanted. Okay? Is that it? Boo. It's a Paul lecture, guys. Huh? She what? Oh, 15 minutes. Oh, we have changed it since. So that is what ultimately our goal is when we engage in requirements analysis. When we define an actual problem that we are trying to resolve, we are trying to get a clear idea of what it is we are trying to do, how important things are, the order they're going to be done in, and so on. Oh, there's some more. How it was supported, yeah, great. What happened when, I've not seen these ones, these are new ones. What happened when the customer used it? It looks like it's a Samsung Galaxy Note 7. The disaster recovery plan. How many of these are there? He's gone way beyond the one I've ever seen. What happened to the system at the end? Oh, okay, they roped it off. What they actually wished for. Ah, now there's an important one. What they actually needed. Sometimes what the customer needs and sometimes what they do is gathered through requirements analysis are not one and the same. And sometimes the customer doesn't realise they need what they actually need. They're asking for something and it's clear from their business, from their organisation, whatever, that they need something else. So you as software engineers, computing professionals, whatever hat you're wearing for your project, because even if you're not doing a relatively standard project that we tend to do in these schools, hands up who's doing a piece of software in some way, shape or form, whether it's a web application or a mobile application or that's less than I was expecting. You two definitely are, I know that for a fact. Right. Put your hands up or I will start asking you questions about what you're doing. Right? So not everyone's doing a piece of software. What are you doing? Right, so you're not going to actually, the actual artifact will be the results of the analysis. Okay. Research and design. Okay. That's going to be very interesting fitting into Graham's pattern where he gets you looking at Bootstrap and yeah, okay. Anyone else? Anyone else not doing a project that's going to involve you doing some form of software engineering? Even design projects are probably going to need to do. You're going to need to do some form of software engineering. Even if you're only planning to take it to prototype level, you're still going to need to engage in a requirements analysis. You're still going to need to understand what it is you're doing. Okay. And even in your case, there's an element of design, understanding your problem, designing what it is you're doing. Okay? Okay. So the question to ask yourself, alright, is why? Why bother? Right? And this actually is interesting stuff, important stuff for your proposals that you're writing currently. Because as part of parcel of your proposal, you are setting out an introduction, a background, and the reader of your proposal is going to expect you to be able to set out a why. Why are you writing an auction website when eBay exists? Not that I'm saying anyone's necessarily writing an auction website. Okay? You're going to spend your time building a solution. The question is that a problem at all? Is it worth solving? Is what you're doing worth solving? Is there stuff out there already that could deliver part of the solution? All of the solution? Could you mash several things together to create a solution? So much stuff out there is actually not, software you use every day. is not actually an original piece of software at all. It's a mashup of various technologies and libraries and open source things. Nubla is bound together original code, but a whole bunch of open source libraries and projects weaved together. Okay? If there are solutions already, why is your solution better? Why are you here? Why have we got to this point in human history where you are sitting there saying, I am going to do X, Y, and Z? All right? And these are things you need to articulate in your proposal. You will, it's due in tomorrow. So ideally, what you've got by now is an introduction and background that sets out a few key pieces of literature. No one's expecting a literature review at this point, but your introduction and background should review some literature, if you understand the distinction. So you'll have an introduction and background, and you'll have a few sensible references to back up your position, establishing that there is a problem. You are proposing a project to find a solution, and that's a key point. You're not proposing a solution at this point, you're proposing a project to create a solution. Okay? And if there's stuff out there already, why are they deficient? You will expand upon this in your project proper, but you've got 1,500 to 3,000 words in your proposal. Ideally, you should start making a bit of a stab at it, okay, in your proposal. Now, SDLC. Who knows what this stands for? Indeed. Now, software development lifecycle is just a term to refer to a general approach to handling the development of a piece of software. It is not, on its own, a piece of a methodology. Okay? It's just a term that means a methodology for handling software development. Okay? But they all involve these key points. Okay? And some of them involve iteration, whereby you will do some of these several times. But fundamentally, even if you're not doing an out-and-out codey, hacky project, you're all going to do aspects of this as part of your project. Okay? And you need to document these things in both a professional and an academic way. When I say professional, I mean using the tools, terms, vernacular of the industry. And when I say academic, I mean using the conventions of the academic world. No first person. So I, don't use I. You do not exist in this dojo. Does anyone get that reference, or am I far too old? Great, okay. Way to make a man feel good. But no first person. Academic language is different from when you're writing a post on Facebook. Okay? But coming back to your project, to your bit of software engineering or technical work, computer science, information systems, whatever it is, your project is, coming back to that work you're going to do as part of your project, you are probably all going to engage in aspects of this. Okay? So, understanding your requirements. Okay? And I mean, it may be too late for some of you, but in some respects it's never too late. I strongly urge each and every one of you not to do your project for your imaginary friend. Okay? Do your utmost to have real people who are going to be involved in your project, who can be your users, your stakeholders, who can feed into the process. Okay? I've seen so many projects fail, not even fail, just be generally mediocre, because they, the person was doing a pet project for themselves, and it's essentially just consisted of them going in their bedroom, for, you know, a few months and cranking out something, and there was no systematic approach to it. There's very little documentation, and there's very little that I, as an assessor, can actually mark. Because remember what I said at the start, the actual thing we mark predominantly is the account of the journey, the report. Yes, we do mark, we mark the artefact, but it's indirect. We mark the artefact through what we see at Viva, so it's factored into your marks in Viva. And there is now a clause in the project assessment booklet, and I know this because I'm the moderator for the project module and I made them add it, that says part of the marks allocated for implementation will be for your actual implementation, the artefact itself, as well as the bit in your report about the implementation. Previously it was ambiguous. It used to, you know, it was quite reasonable for someone to interpret implementation, the marks of implementation, as being solely for what you write about the implementation. You do at least get some marks now factored in for what you do practically. But they never use, you know, what I'm saying is, it's more about the journey, I keep saying this, it's important, than the actual final artefact. I had a master's project a couple of years ago, and she was in the military, and she decided what she was going to do was to attempt to see whether or not there was this military mapping system. She was going to try and reverse engineer it using open source software. And she failed to do that. She failed to replicate this piece of software using open source equivalents. In her head, she'd failed. She got distinction for the project. She was panicking come the hand in. Oh, well, I failed. I'm going to fail. Oh, I didn't get it to work. It's about the journey. And the first crucial part of the journey is a good requirements analysis. So, understanding who are going to be involved in the problem solution, is important. Even if they're not going to be, none of them are going to be directly involved in your project. Alright? So if you were going to do, I don't know, a car sales site, used car sales site, with reviews, right? Who are going to be the stakeholders in that? Sorry? Employees of who? Car sales site. Second-hand car sales site. So where you could go on and sell your car that you don't want anymore.
People who sell their cars.
People who sell their cars. People who buy cars.
People who review cars.
Elaborate.
Like review sites, like
System administrators.
What's a system administrator?
So, for example, you remove the data. So you look at everything. For example,
You need to, people think I mean, it's good advice for everyone. Try to get away from technology until you have to touch technology. Okay? So a common problem I get when people follow your project ideas by me is they'll come up with something and they say, oh, what do you want? I say, what do you want to do for your project? And they say, I want to do a Java web app. Right? You have no problem. You haven't defined a problem at all. Right? There is no project there. There is a vague intent to use some technology. You don't have a project at that point. Now, if you come to me and say, I want to create and I'll use it because she's not here, and I think it's an absolutely stonking idea, a dating website based around food, where you go on and you post the kind of food you like, and it will match you up with other people who like that cuisine. So at least if the date is crap, you're going to get a nice meal. Oh, it's a great idea. I think that might actually be crazy enough to take off. I think that might work. Right? That's an idea. That's a problem to solve. She didn't come to me and say, I want to write a PHP application. And then I have to stick pins in her to find out what it's actually about. So try to put the technology aside. Before, every computerised system is going to have system administrators. That's filler. Think about the problem. Who are the stakeholders? Okay? What are the unknowns? So what do you need to solve the problem? Right? What data are you going to need? And that doesn't mean, like, you know, in terms of a database, what pieces of information are you going to need? Functions and features, and again, not talking about technology, but what activities are going to need to happen to actually solve the problem? Right? Can you divide it into sub-problem? Think about how it can be represented. Have you seen similar problems before? Can you learn from what's been done before? And that is why we do a literature review. And don't get hung up about literature reviews being solely about stuff that is written down. I get my students to call that their section literature and state-of-the-art review. Okay? And what's meant by that is stuff that's gone on in the universe before you that other people have done that is relevant to your work. Okay? And you may find that there are commonalities between previous works. Think of consistent mistakes they made. Right? Can you learn from them? Are there things they do well that you can learn from? Okay? If there is stuff out there, you know, can you use aspects of their solution? Okay? And can you come up with an actual effective design model that represents a solution to your problem? Is the problem fundamentally too big? And do you need to scale it down? Perhaps that's fine. The project is about the journey, not the solution. Think back to my master's student and her lofty ideas of saving her, I don't know what it was, brigade or whatever it was, you know, thousands of pounds, millions of pounds per annum, by not having to buy this expensive piece of custom military software, right? She scaled it down in the end. She re-scoped the project as an investigation of open source software in a military context. It's about the journey. Okay? Testing's an important point. So many people do their projects and they do a bit of requirements analysis, they do UML, maybe some wireframes, they go through prototypes, they do iterations, and they get to the end and they say, yes, I gave it to the users and they said it was awesome. Conclusion. I'm just going to write a brief précis of everything that preceded this in the document, and that is my conclusion. The end. There's a whole chunk of marks available for that, right? So, think about how you're going to test your work. What are you going to test it against? Traditionally, if you've got a set of requirements, one approach is to make sure that all of the requirements that have been set out can actually be met with the final solution. There's a raft of testing approaches that you will either be taught about or you can find out about. I'm not going to go into them now. But there needs to be some systematic testing strategy in every project. Validation against stakeholder requirements, what I just alluded to. Okay? So, requirements engineering is fundamentally the process of establishing the services that the customer requires from a system and the constraints under which it is operated and developed. Right? Two key aspects. Something that's really rigid helps no one. Okay? But there needs to be enough detail there to avoid any ambiguity, any occurrences of, asking for a swing and getting a rope on hanging off a tree. Okay? Problems are that, and I alluded to this earlier on, There's often a difference between, and it's badly worded, stakeholders usually know what they want, but they often don't know what they need. They may lack knowledge of the business holistically. So you'll get stakeholders who are talking about their own little corner of the world. And if they're the only access to stakeholders you've got, then the system, when it goes live to everybody, won't do what it's supposed to do. I'll give you an actual real-world example. I'm the personal tutor coordinator for the school, and they recently said to us, there's a wonderful new personal tutor system going live. So, oh, great, lovely. And then when they showed it to me, I couldn't do something as simple as searching for all students in the School of Computer Science and Maths that don't have a personal tutor. Now, as a person who allocates personal tutors, that's a fairly obvious thing I need to be able to do with it. All right? Why did they not input that key bit of functionality in? Because the only stakeholders they involve were management types. Very different context. They defined what they needed from the system. But often stakeholders don't know what they need, what their organisation needs, what their colleagues need. Okay? This is a problem. Stakeholders will define requirements in their own terms. So they may use jargon. If you as a software developer go along to, I don't know, a hospital to develop a piece of software, and they're using all kinds of medical, not just medical jargon, but hospital administration jargon. If I said to you guys, I said to you, yeah, I'll have to ask the SMT about that, would you know what I mean? I mean the senior management team. Right? People who sit at the top of the university and make all our lives wonderful. Wonderful, this is going out live. We love the SMT.
No, we don't.
You can say that, you're paying. And I'm alluding to this, conflicting requirements. Okay? There may be political factors that are influencing things. The requirements change during the analysis process. That'll happen all the time. Okay? And this change may be because new stakeholders turn up, the business environment may change, there may be all reasons for changing requirements. You know, they may suddenly realise, well, actually, no, it's that thing we said is really important, it's trivial, we need this. What do you do? How do you handle it? Okay. At the very least, and I'm skipping a few slides here, at the very least, you will need to set out functional and non-functional requirements in your application. Okay? Functional requirements are the broad things that the system does. You know, given this input, you will get that output. Okay? If this criteria is met, the system will do this. Okay? Non-functional requirements are constraints. The system, you know, the client has a Windows infrastructure, they have Windows servers, they run MS SQL and IIS, therefore the thing must be developed in a platform that's appropriate for that. No one's going to advocate Java servlets in that situation, ideally. That is a non-functional requirement. The system must respond within, you know, 10 hours of the user's pressing a key. That's a non-functional requirement. But what I often see in projects is a bunch of these, again, just plucked out of the person's backside. You know, if you're writing down searches must take place and the results be displayed to the user within 10 seconds. Why? Why 10 seconds? Why not 5 seconds? Get out. No, they're joking. You're from the old days, aren't you? Programming one, you get booed if you're late. Yeah. Okay. He does have very nice trainers though. We'll let him off. So I was saying about non-functional requirements. There needs to be a rationale for them, okay? Don't just pluck them out of thin air. So again, with everything, and this applies to pretty much everything in your project, have something to back it up. You know, the system must respond within 10 seconds when you're doing a search because, you know, Bill Bloggs in 2012 did some research and found that, you know, 70% of users navigate away from a page, a search page, if it takes more than 10 seconds to respond. There is a non-functional requirement that is backed up with literature. And that's what you should be looking at. Rather than just saying, oh, I'll just pluck a whole bunch of these out my backside because I've got to put some in. And that's actually another good point, okay? We, over the last 3 years, 4 years if you've done a placement, think of what we've taught you as being a tool chest. And we've given you a vast array of different tools, okay? So if you think of a tool chest, we've given you a hammer, and a chisel, and a screwdriver. And then bizarrely, we've given you a dummy, right? Like a pacifier, what a baby puts in his mouth, right? And then you actually say, you know, you go out into the great wide world and we say, you know, fit a door, fix a car. You're going, yes, I've got my tool chest. They taught me how to use all these tools. It's wonderful, right? And then one day they say to you, go and babysit this, you know, 6-month-old child. Now, for each of those jobs, you won't go, right, I've got to use every single one of these tools for this job, right? You wouldn't start, you know, shoving the dummy into the car, would you? You wouldn't get your hammer out your tool chest and start applying it vigorously to the baby, right? So use the right tool for the job. If you need a SWOT analysis, use it. If you don't need a SWOT analysis, don't use it, okay? SWOT analyses are a pet hate of mine because I see so many times in projects, students, a SWOT analysis to me is a tool to answer a question, to make a decision, right? Understand the strengths, weaknesses, so on, blah, 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 of a particular course of action, right? A proposed course of action. And I see so many people, they do a gratuitous SWOT analysis with another commentary, and I say, what was the decision you were making here? I don't know. And when you drill down into it, it's basically, the decision is, should I do a final year project? You ain't got a choice, guys, you've got to do one, right? So, the right tool for the job. If you need to do a class diagram, use one, yeah.
Isn't the SWOT analysis good though, because it kind of makes you understand the project more, like what are the weaknesses of my project, and therefore you can kind of put that into testing
But
as
it's
well.
a decision, it's a yo-yo. A SWOT analysis is a tool for helping you make a business decision. You know, evaluating a business opportunity. So you might do a SWOT analysis, if you at the end of your project had done something with commercial, you know, value, and you were thinking about the context in which to release your software, right? Absolutely, SWOT away. But right at the start of your project, before you've developed anything, and then you're kind of like, you know, strengths. I know a lot about Java, right? I'm just warning you against using things gratuitously, I suppose. We will mark you based on whether you're using the right stuff in the right place. And I see that, I see these often, these kind of like projects where they're almost like they follow a formula, and the person has probably got another project out the library and gone, oh yeah, they had a class diagram there, I should have a class diagram there. And maybe it's not contextually relevant. Maybe you're not doing object-oriented. Maybe you're using a non-object-oriented language. Okay? So, but back to functional v non-functional requirements. Functional requirements are the actual things your application does. Non-functional are the surrounding constraints, technologies, response times, you know, standards, and so on. Now, functional requirements might be high-level statements of what the system should do, right? Fundamentally, they will describe the system in detail, what it does in detail. Okay? And conversely, the non-functional, there you go. The system shall be available to all clinics during normal working hours. Downtime within normal working hours should not exceed 5 seconds in any one day. But why? Why 5 seconds? Downtime shall not exceed 5 seconds in any one day. That's, yeah, okay.
That's not really.
But it's a hospital by implication, clinics. So maybe the argument in this case is, well, someone, the system being down, not being available when a medic needs to make a life or death decision about what drug to administer, could kill someone. That would be a perfectly reasonable rationale. And like I just said earlier on, it might be specifying a particular programming language, development platform, might be political. You must use an agile methodology. That's less about a functional, non-functional requirement of the system, but maybe there may be more something like test-driven development, something like that. There may be political constraints on the project. Right, one point. Try to avoid filler in your projects. Okay? Something that you are just writing down because you think we're expecting to see it. You can assume that your audience is knowledgeable, right? You don't need to explain to us in great detail what HTML is, right? We kind of know. It's sort of our jobs, right? HTML arose. I mean, what you've got to get sometimes is someone going, their project more or less consists of first the earth cooled, then the dinosaurs came, and then they got all too big and fat and they all died out and turned to oil, right? You can start too far at the beginning, all right, and give too much detail. And the reason I say that is because, to some extent, I think push-push slides are doing this. Which is why I keep skipping some of them. Okay? But this is worth pointing out. Requirements engineering, there's lots of different ways of approaching requirements engineering, but they're fundamentally, you will do a variation of the same things. You will attempt to get requirements out of your stakeholders. You will analyse those requirements. You will check that it makes sense, and then you'll manage them going forward into the project. Okay? So, when you are engaging in requirements elicitation, discovery, right, you have to work with the end users, the stakeholders, and basically try to discover about not just the new system, but their working practices, what they do at the moment. How do they do it? What can't they do currently that they need to be able to do? I remember back to projects I've been involved in my past life, and why they went wrong, because these initial steps weren't met. Often, they dive in at the system level, at the tech level, without truly understanding the domain. I don't mean, a domain in a Windows networking sense. I mean, the area. If you were writing a university system to keep track of students, right, you need to understand, the fundamental relationships between, a student and a course and a module and a school and a faculty, and the fact that these things have course directors and module leaders and teaching staff and blah 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 blah. You wouldn't go rampaging in like an armed policeman with the kit and the technology and a copy of NetBeans before you understood all that. I've got a new angle with the first years on Programming 1 actually. Do you remember in the glory days when I used to go pen and paper at you lot? Yeah? It's trying to make you use pen and paper to plan the thing out in advance, right? And I'm saying to the first years now, look, I want you to tell me how to get to Kingston University from your house. And they go, okay, well I goes, in Swahili. Oh. Well, I don't know Swahili. Right, great. Do you know how to get to Kingston University from your house? Well, of course. Do you know how to get to Kingston University from Mill Hill East Tube Station? No. Right, so I told you how do you get from Mill Hill East to Kingston University in Swahili. I said, what would you do first? Learn Swahili or learn how to get to Mill Hill East and then translate it into Swahili. Right? The point I'm making here is you need to understand the problem before you can express it as a solution in technical terms. Okay? And there's lots of stakeholders you will involve in that. And I think maybe now you're starting to see why earlier on I said to you, try to involve real people in your projects. Okay? So if you are currently planning to work as a one-man band, think about how you can open this up. You must have friends and relatives and, you know, people you can con into actually acting as stakeholders, as end users, people who can feed into your process. Okay? It makes the project so much better. You will discover your requirements, you will classify them, you'll prioritise them, and then fundamentally there will be a document that describes them. I'm rather hoping that at some point in this magnum opus of pushpas, that I just said, okay, this is worth highlighting. When you write your requirements, you should try to use a standard format, and there is a variety of formats you can use, which hopefully will be mentioned, and if not, I will talk about them. But be consistent, try to avoid the use of jargon, right? But don't be constrained by a particular format. If you need to explain a particular requirement, to do a list, a table, and the rest of another one as prose or a diagram will help, that is fine. Okay? And I did see you've got some examples coming up. Okay? So here, they did a flow chart, flow diagram rather. Here is a use case diagram, far more like what you were likely to produce, I suspect, most of you. Okay? How you're breaking the problems down, the requirements down. I think the next one's another use case diagram. It is. This is a nice example. It comes back to what I was saying earlier on about testing. This person here has actually used their requirements later on in their document as part of their testing strategy. Okay? And there is a systematic approach being used here. Okay? They are not just pulling things out their backside and making unsubstantiated comments. I knew I should have had these 16 points before coming here. I'm lying, of course, I only have 15. So, how can you gather requirements? Lots and lots of ways you can do that. Mostly involves talking to people. Okay? Talking is a term these days that can mean many things. It can mean talking. It can mean email. It can mean chat, online chat, Facebook, and so on. Okay? That's one that is often missed. Own research on analogous systems. In English, Pushpa. What you found out about similar bits of kit. or, you know, the literature review, your state-of-the-art review you did at the beginning of the project, where you looked at existing systems. Perhaps you derive some requirements from that process. That's fine. Okay? I don't want to keep going back over there. I've got remote control here. Everyone knows what brainstorming is. One-to-one interviews can be very useful. And this is all stuff that fundamentally that will feed into your requirements and will support the fact that the system needs to do this, X, Y, and Z. So many projects, I'll get them, and I'll get a page that says, here are the requirements. And this one is must have, and this one is should have, and this one is could have, and this one is won't have. Why? Where did they come from? Again, did they just come out of your bottom? So, there needs to be a trail for your requirements. Okay? So in the back of your document, perhaps as an appendix, you'd have the accounts, the transcripts of things like interviews. You would have maybe in your main body of your document some discussion of the outcomes of your interviews with a reference to the appendix. Okay? Open-ended questions to get the interviewee to start toking. Well, it would certainly be an icebreaker. Group interviews, often you've got no choice, you can't get lots of people at once. There's some interesting dynamics that can come out in groups. And you could even actually do a video recording. You can make a link available to the video recording. And again, this is all stuff that shows the journey. Right? If you do stuff as part of your project, whatever it is, think about how you are going to get it into that document. Think about how in your document that we mark, there is something that says, I did this work. Now, something like a group interview, I mean, you know, you can't really turn that into something that appears in the report. But you could record the thing, and you could have a link in the report. Maybe take a picture during the meeting to say there was a group meeting. Figure 6, group meeting with so-and-so stakeholders. A full recording of this report is at this URL, and there is a transcript of the meeting in Appendix C. Okay? Facilitated sessions, a big group meeting. Now, I am not going to talk about JAD. What's that? Because I'm going to talk a bit more about Agile, I think. Okay. Questionnaires. Most of you, a lot of you, will use questionnaires in your project in some way, shape or form. Right? And again, this is another example of where I will say to you, where did the questions come from? Did you pull them out of your bottom, arse if you like. I hope you bleep that out up top. Well, I should have said to them recording live, yeah, my lectures need a kind of like, 5-second delay on, so you can bleep me out if need be. Yes, questionnaires, you will use questionnaires. Many of you will use questionnaires, and many of you, unfortunately, will use questionnaires badly. Okay? You will just invent questions that seem like a good idea. You know, I asked 200 users, I gave 200 users a questionnaire. The questions was, what is your name? What is your quest? What is the average land speed velocity of an unladen swallow?
Is that a European swallow or an African swallow?
I don't know that. Usually when I do Python references, no one gets it. So, be systematic in designing your questionnaires. And there is literature you can go to in how to design good questionnaires. You know, a good start would be a Google search. How to design a questionnaire. Software, your requirements gathering, designing a questionnaire. Actually try to discover things. There will be things during your project that you aren't taught anywhere. You've probably noticed this. I mean, I've got the technical requirements session coming up mid-November that I'll be doing with you guys. But you've probably noticed that I kind of hijack these things a bit to interject a bit of project according to Paul stuff. But notwithstanding, and maybe some of my colleagues do the same. But notwithstanding these sessions we have, the interactions you have with your supervisor, the stuff you get taught on your modules, there will be stuff on your project that you will not know how to do, and that we will not teach you. And part of the thing that we're hoping you get out of your course is an understanding of how to go and find things out for yourself, and where to look, and places you might look. And it ain't always Google.
Bing.
It's Bing, yeah. Actually, Bing's a lot better for piracy.
Really?
Yeah.
What's
Piracy.
You wouldn't steal a car.
No, I wouldn't.
You
Okay.
wouldn't.
So what I'm saying is, come back to questionnaires. Have a rationale for your questionnaire. Okay? How many years have you been operating the current system? Why do you think they might have asked that?
So they could ask the actual company how good that system is.
So we're two stakeholders, right, in a business environment, right? You have been using the current system for 5 years. I've been using it for 2 weeks, right? Who is likely to have something more credible to say about it?
The guy who has the longest
So
browser.
the system was very complicated. And for the 2 weeks I will not be able to figure out exactly where the pitfalls are as an analysis. But
So
the people they use, they become
It's become second nature, and they know how to work around it. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, it's a good point actually. But you can see why it's an interesting question to ask. There's a question of competence, but there's also a question of getting set in your ways. Maybe the people who say 3 years or more will hate the new system because it's different when it comes to testing. So it's about trying to establish a context there. But if you're 3 years or more person then answers it took them 3 months or more to become familiar, right? Then that says something interesting about the current system, doesn't it? So can you see there was a rationale behind these questions? They were trying to discover something about the current system and the demographic of the people using it. Okay? Okay. Prototyping. You should all do prototyping. And I'll talk about the role of a prototype, or prototypes in an agile approach in a bit. Okay? And I had a student who did this in my current batch of final year projects that I've just marked, and it went really well. Don't think you have to do something complex to understand requirements. Oh, I'm going to go and do a high fidelity prototype, and that's going to take me 6 months to create something that's almost the entire application. Right? Things that you can euphemistically call back of a fag packet type interventions are great. So when we talk about, building a prototype from your requirements, wireframing, right? There's all kinds of ways you can do that, but sometimes just pen and paper. That terrible term again is the order of the day. You show it to the client. You see how they react to it. You make it real for them, not just some list of requirements in a table. Okay? And you keep going round until you've captured all the requirements, until you're not getting anything more out of it. And perhaps you're on a stage where you can move on to use cases. And again, remember that what I'm describing here is a set of tools. Don't feel you have to use a particular tool in your context. Before you go ahead and use any tool, genuinely believe that you need it. If you are sitting there and you're writing up your project and you think, I'm not sure whether to put this in there or not, the answer is probably no. If you can't answer the question, why do I need this? Well, does this add value to my document? The answer is probably, it doesn't. Okay? You've all come across use cases before, correct? Anyone not familiar with use cases? Good. So I won't dwell there. Okay. Now, requirements validation is all about determining, yes, these are the correct requirements. You know, the requirement is a tyre with a rope around it tied to a tree. Not the requirement is, you know, a tree stump or all those other pictures. Fixing, if you get this wrong, fixing it after you've written the software is not cheap. So there's lots of ways you can do that. Review your requirements, prototype we've talked about, right? And developing the test for the requirement to see if they are actually testable, whether you can actually test that requirement down the line. Now, a key thing you will all do as well, hopefully, is you'll need to prioritise your requirements. Unless you're some super multitasker, you are not going to do everything at once. So, you'll need to prioritise your requirements. Many project management methodologies, software development, use the Moscow approach, where every requirement is given a must-have, should-have, could-have, won't-have prioritisation. Okay? In principle, what you're supposed to do is classify 60% of them, a maximum of 60% of them in this bracket, a maximum of 80% of them in this bracket, and obviously, you know, most of them should be 100%. W's, won't-haves are the, yeah, we can do that next year when we've got more money type requirements. I think it should make the team. Yes, we've noted down your requirement and we've assigned it an appropriate value. It's there in the W dustbin. Okay? Now, and that's essentially, to some extent, the order in which you're going to attack things, but not always. But it's certainly the order of importance for requirements to be delivered. And again, I often see projects where this is done in the form of a table. Here are the requirements. Requirement 1, blah, 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 M. Requirement 2, blah, 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 M. Requirement 3, blah, 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 S. Why? Okay? If the project is about the journey, you have to explain the journey. Okay? Don't assume anything is self-evident. Have you got an example in there? Yeah.
Sorry. Would I be able to classify the program as a functional or non-functional?
What do you mean class it's functional or non-functional?
I can't even use requirement.
Prototyping is something you do, it's not a requirement of your system. Okay? Any more than, you know, write a Word document about the project is a requirement. A requirement is something one of your stakeholder needs from your system. More accurately, what I've just described there is a functional requirement. Yeah? A non-functional requirement is a constraint that must be applied to your proposed system. It must be written in Java. It must be available, blah, 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 blah. Strictly speaking, musts and shoulds will usually deliver 80% of the proposed benefit of the system. And there's something called the 80-20 rule that stipulates 80% of the effort takes as much time as the remaining 20% to finish off. 80% is often good enough. So that's why the general rule of thumb is that the must and the should haves in your Moscow prioritisation add up to 80% of the stuff to do, the time to be allocated to the project. Okay? And in that way, if you don't get to the coulds, you could argue the system is still good enough. Okay. Here is an example of some Moscow prioritisation. I'm seeing this for the first time myself, so let me digest quickly. I mean, maybe in this document there was a preamble or a postscript explaining why these were important. So maybe, there was a preceding bit of content that said, it's a bit small, I'll read them out. So 3.4.3, system ticketing features. Both the customers and the support staff should be able to update their contact details. When a user posts say questions, interesting. There has to be some sort of timestamp so we can display the raised tickets in order of date. Now my gut feeling there is he's picking them out of his backside because there's not much of a flow to this, to be honest. I would hope there was a rationale before this list of requirements saying that, customers and support staff have recently issued a legal case against the university because they felt that their contact details were being abused. Right? That would be a perfectly legitimate reason to justify why them having control of their own contact details would be a must. Bit of an extreme must. It was off the top of my head. Okay. I happen to know that this is the only thing that Pushpa has put on this presentation about Agile. And I want to talk about Agile in not some depth because it's getting on a bit, but I want to talk about Agile in a bit of depth. So many times I read projects that say, I am going to use the Agile methodology. No, you ain't, right? Because there's no such thing as the Agile methodology. There is a whole raft load of Agile methodologies. Scrum, DSDM, extreme programming, DAD. RAD is a precursor of Agile.
Extreme program.
Extreme! I always have visions of some bloke hanging off a cliff with a laptop. Sorry? The unified process, rational unified process, yeah. Point I'm making here is there's a ton of them. So what you should do, and this is moving away from requirements analysis and more into the methodology of your project, right? Essentially how you are going to manage it, how you are going to go about it, the method by which you are going to achieve it, right? You are going to need to have a systematic methodology. So, there are a ton of Agile methodologies. You may or may not have been taught about these in certain contexts. There is a raft of material out there. Are you all familiar with the Dummies books, the Dummies guides, the yellow ones?
Dummy's guide to whatever.
Yeah, Dummies Guide to Agile. I will just say it's amazing what you can find if you type into a web browser Agile for Dummies PDF.
Download.
Okay. But Agile is the current kind of in thing. Agile involves an iterative process. So all the Agile methodologies have this in common. The idea that you do a bit of work, like development work, and a prototype comes out at the end of that development work. And that will be a small little bit of functionality of a system. By no means complete. Tiny bit of functionality, but that in its own right ideally gives business benefit. And then that is shown to end users and stakeholders, and they feed into the next cycle. And so at each point, at each iteration, the stakeholders actually can be involved. There is something called the Agile Manifesto. Right? And they are saying people and interaction between people over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, collaboration over contracts, and responding to change over rigidly following a plan. That's what's good about agile methodologies. That we talked earlier on about how requirements change. Agile is very good at responding to change because you have that iterative cycle built into the process. So, if you do a bit, you come up with a prototype, right? And as a result of that prototype, your stakeholders go, oh no, that's not what we meant at all. You can take action at a relatively early stage. Contrast if you was using what's called a big design up front methodology, waterfall, something more conventional, where you essentially do requirements analysis and go away and develop software for 6 months, and then come back after a long period of time and go, here you are, here it is. We didn't want that bit of string dangling from the tree. We wanted a proper swing. Okay? Agile methodologies involve the stakeholders throughout, and that's what makes them good. However, it also makes them, a bit anarchic. So it may not necessarily be the best approach for you. All right? It may well be that you have access to your stakeholders at the start of the project, and then they're not going to be available for 6 months. So agile would, any agile methodology would not be appropriate. I'll also say that there are lots of agile methodologies, DSDM, Scrum and such like, right? If you in your project say, I will use the DSDM methodology, if I'm marking it, I will say, well, show me. Where was your product owner, and where was your, role this and role that? Agile, DSDM rather, stipulates about, I can't remember, about a dozen, maybe more, discrete roles. It essentially assumes a development team, a project management team. Scrum, to some extent, does too. Extreme programming, one of the key tenets of extreme programming is pair programming. The idea that a development team works in pairs, 2 individuals coding together. Okay? So, you can't do that unless you've got a clone sitting at home.
Yes.
Excellent. Then you can do extreme programming.
Yes.
Right? The rest of you, right, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to come up with a methodology. And it's quite appropriate to say, okay, I'm going to use a methodology that takes this aspect of DSDM and this aspect of Scrum and this aspect of XP or whatever, and this is the methodology I will use. You don't have to just pick something off the shelf. You can design your own. As long as it is systematic and it is demonstrably what you did. And as part of your proposal, ideally you should be talking about a methodology. So you should have some idea of that by now. Okay? I guess my guys are going to find out when I go upstairs and start reading through their drafts for their proposals. I'll tell you in a few hours. No, I'm just looking around. Yeah, there we go. But the rest of you, think about the methodology you're going to use. Is an agile methodology right for you? If so, which aspects of established specific agile methods are you going to use? Could you use an off-the-shelf one? There's loads of them. There's some I've never heard of. One of my students last year, he did discover one that I've never heard of. It was very well suited to a one-man band project. I learned something new from his project. I love it when that happens. That's great. Okay? Okay. Oh, no, ethics. Right. It is moderately important. I don't suppose I can get away with that not saying it. Who is planning to use human beings in their project?
I haven't decided.
What? No one is going to, at any point during their project, talk to a human being, have them feed into their project.
Alright.
Right.
Put my name on it.
Okay.
Put my name on the table. Hold it down.
Yeah. You're not going to lay them on a table and carve them open. My project is I'm going to invent the Borg. So I'm going to lay them down on a table and carve them open and lob a Raspberry Pi in their head. Yeah, maybe not.
Sounds good.
No, thank you. I don't want to actually restart now. Go away.
Bit in real life.
If you're handling personal data, right, you need to consider the ethical implications, right? Generally speaking, right, there's no need to keep personal data. I can't think of many projects where you are genuinely, for the sake of the project, going to have to keep names, addresses, bank account details, etc. Right? And if you are for testing purposes, you can create dummy data. You will need an ethical, something ethical in your proposal. We're talking about ethics, okay? And for most of you, you can get away with just a general boilerplate that says something along the lines of, it is not expected that any ethical issues will exist in this project. Any personal data that is used will be anonymised, or it is not expected that any personal data will be used, right? Just it needs to a little throwaway comment on this subject, unless your supervisor has already spoken to you about this, and they will all know what your projects are. If there are any ethical gotchas, they would have almost certainly already said to you. The rest of you could just pretty much just have a simple, it is not expected, blah 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 blah. Okay. Okay. That's it. So, oh, okay. Please clap me. I wish you all good luck with your projects. And within reason, I don't mind you bouncing, coming and asking me stuff, even if, even if I'm not your supervisor. Within reason, if there's a queue, as long as my arm outside my door during office hours, I reserve the right to say no. My guys come in, the rest of you go away. I will say that there is a difference to some extent between how academics see projects, and we all come from different backgrounds. We have different expertise. So inherently, in something as subjective as a final year project, there will be differences of interpretation in how things are marked. So my last point to you is, be sensible and strategic and have a bit of savvy, a bit of nous about your supervisor. Play to your audience, as it were. Your supervisor may tell you things that are at odds with necessarily what I tell you, or what some other member of staff is telling you. Alright? In some respects, it's a good practice for when you go into the real world, into industry. You will, at some point in your future, you will have a manager who asks you to do something completely insane. And you will say to them, but it makes no sense, because, and they say, don't care, I want you to do it. And you will say, yeah, but so-and-so says it's insane, because, don't care, I want you to do it. Alright? And you will, in the end, you will try to lobby and you will try to explain it to them, and in the end, you will get to a point where you feel you are faced with one of two options. You either do it, or you don't do it.
Taken out.
You don't, or you either do it or you don't do it. In employment, the don't do it is you resign. And if you've got a mortgage to pay, then that's a bit of a pain in the backside. If you're talking about your final year project, I think the moral of the story I'm saying here is your supervisor is God. Okay? Your supervisor has the final say on how things should be presented and what they expect and what should be done. But guys, and this is an important thing, towards the end of your project, you will start to find out who your second marker is. And that brings a whole other perspective with it. Right? So, when you do find that out, it's certainly worth going and having a word with your second marker, getting a feel for them. If you already know them, you know, if it's me, for instance, you pretty much know what I'm going to be looking for now. Right? But if it's someone new to you or someone you don't know, go and have a chat with them. You know, see what they're asking, run a few things you're doing by them, and like I said, play to your audience. Your audience, fundamentally in your project, is your supervisor and your second marker. Yeah?
So is the second marker's marks the one that become like the final marks?
No, what happens is the supervisor marks, the second marker marks. If there is less than 10% difference between them, generally they'll be averaged out. There will be a discussion, right, and you know there'll be a negotiation up or down for one of them, right. If there's no agreement, then it goes to a third marker.
Oh wow.
Happens all the time. But you can preempt that by being a bit savvy about your project as I've just said.
Alright.
Okay?
Cheers.
Okay guys, good to see you all.